What happens when a single father accidentally walks in on a billionaire CEO at her most vulnerable moment? The security alarms scream, guards rush in with weapons drawn, and his entire life hangs by a thread. But what she said next, what she did next, changed everything he thought he knew about power, trust, and second chances. This is the story of Ethan Rowe, a man who fixed broken things for a living until the night he accidentally fixed something no one else could reach. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The rain hammered against the glass walls of the Hale Tower like thousands of impatient fingers, each drop demanding entry into the gleaming monument of steel and ambition that pierced the Seattle skyline. 47 stories of polished marble, brushed chrome, and silence, the kind of silence that only existed in places where money whispered instead of shouted. Ethan Rowe stood in the basement mechanical room, his work uniform already dark with sweat despite the October chill that seeped through the concrete walls. His hands, calloused and scarred from years of wrench work and wire stripping, moved with practiced efficiency across the electrical panel before him. He didn't need to see the circuit diagram anymore. After 3 years maintaining this building, he knew its bones better than he knew his own apartment. Panel 7B, check, he muttered to himself, marking off another line on his clipboard. His voice echoed slightly in the fluorescent-lit space, bouncing off industrial water heaters and HVAC units that hummed their mechanical lullaby. Voltage stable, current draw normal. His radio crackled to life, startling him despite years of expecting it. "Rowe, you copy?" Ethan pressed the button on the device, clipped to his belt. "Copy, dispatch. Go ahead." "Got a priority work order just came through. Executive level, 45th floor, room 4507. Climate control malfunction. CEO's assistant says the temperature regulation's gone haywire in one of the private suites." Ethan's eyebrows rose slightly. The executive level. He'd been up there maybe twice in 3 years, both times as part of a larger maintenance crew. Always supervised, always watched. The 45th floor was where the real power lived. Corner offices with views that cost more per square foot than most people's homes. Conference rooms where billion-dollar decisions happened over coffee, served in cups that probably cost more than his weekly paycheck. "Rowe? You there?" "Yeah, copy that. Heading up now." "What's the entry code?" There was a pause, the sound of keyboard clicking. "Says here you'll need temporary access. I'm uploading credentials to your badge now. Should be active in 30 seconds. Badge scan will get you through the elevator and the suite door. Job should be simple. Probably just a thermostat recalibration." "Roger. On my way." Ethan gathered his tools quickly. Multimeter, screwdriver set, diagnostic tablet, flashlight. He moved with the efficiency of someone who'd learned early that wasted motion was wasted time, and wasted time was time he couldn't spend with the only person in the world who mattered. His daughter, Sophie. 7 years old, with her mother's dark curls and a smile that could melt the armor he'd built around himself after his wife left them both 2 years ago. Sophie was with Mrs. Chen right now, their neighbor who watched her after school until Ethan finished his shift. Every minute of overtime was another dollar toward Sophie's stability, another brick in the foundation he was desperately trying to build for her future. The elevator ride to the 45th floor took less than a minute, but Ethan felt the change in pressure, in atmosphere. The basement smelled like machine oil and concrete. The executive level smelled like money, subtle leather, expensive wood polish, and something else he couldn't quite name. Power, maybe. Or the absence of fear. The corridor was empty when he stepped out, his work boots making soft sounds on carpet so thick it felt like walking on clouds. Recessed lighting cast a warm glow that somehow managed to be both inviting and intimidating. Abstract art hung on the walls, the kind Ethan never understood but assumed was important because it existed here. Room 4507 was at the end of the hallway, past offices with frosted glass doors bearing names in elegant script. He'd heard of some of them: Vice President of Global Operations, Chief Financial Officer, Director of Strategic Initiatives, titles that sounded more like military ranks than job descriptions. His badge beeped green when he pressed it against the reader. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed too loud in the hushed corridor. Ethan pushed the door open carefully, announcing himself as he entered. Maintenance. Hear about the climate control issue. The space beyond was not what he expected. Instead of an office or conference room, he'd entered what appeared to be a private suite, a transitional space between the public corporate world and something more personal. To his left, a sitting area with leather furniture positioned around a low table. To his right, a kitchenette with appliances that looked like they'd never been used. Straight ahead, another door, partially open, light spilling through the gap. The thermostat was on the wall near the entrance, its digital display flickering erratically between 58 and 79 degrees. Ethan approached it, setting down his toolbox with a soft thud. The unit was a high-end model, probably cost more than his monthly rent. He pulled out his diagnostic tablet and began the connection sequence. That's when he heard it. A sound from the room beyond the partially open door, soft, barely audible over the building's ambient hum. Movement. The rustle of fabric. Ethan's hand froze over his tablet. His mind raced through protocols. The work order hadn't mentioned anyone being present. Executive suites were supposed to be cleared when maintenance was called. That was standard procedure specifically to avoid, "Hello?" he called out, louder this time. "Maintenance is here?" The dispatch said this suite was unoccupied. No response. He should leave. That was the smart thing to do. Radio dispatch. Report the discrepancy. Wait for clarification. He'd been in this job long enough to know that deviation from protocol was how people got fired, especially at a company like Hale Industries where privacy and discretion weren't just valued. They were weaponized. But the temperature reading on the malfunctioning thermostat caught his eye again. 58 degrees. If someone was in there and the heat was malfunctioning in this kind of weather, they could be in trouble. Uncomfortable at best, at risk at worst. Ethan made a decision he would replay in his mind 1,000 times in the days to come. He moved toward the inner door, tool belt clinking softly with each step. "I'm coming in to check the climate control system," he announced clearly. "If someone's in there, please let me know. I don't want to..." He pushed the door open. Time fractured into slow-motion fragments. The room beyond was a private changing area, elegant, minimalist, clearly designed for someone who valued function over ostentation. A full-length mirror dominated one wall. A wardrobe stood open, revealing suits and dresses in muted colors. And in the center of it all, turning toward him with an expression that began as surprise and transformed instantly into something harder, more guarded. A woman. But not just any woman. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as recognition slammed into him like a physical force. Vivian Hale. The Vivian Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. The woman whose face appeared in Forbes and Fortune and the Wall Street Journal. The ghost who ran this entire tower from somewhere people like him never went. She stood frozen, one hand holding a blouse she'd clearly been about to put on, the other instinctively crossing over herself in a defensive posture that was both dignified and deeply vulnerable. She was wearing slacks and an undershirt, her usually immaculate appearance caught in a moment of transition. But what struck Ethan most, what would haunt him in the seconds that followed, was not her state of undress, but her eyes. They were wide with shock, yes, but beneath that shock was something else, something ancient and raw. Fear. Not the fear of embarrassment or professional impropriety, but something deeper, something that looked like trauma given shape. "I'm sorry," Ethan said immediately, his hands rising in a gesture of surrender, his words tumbling over themselves. "I'm so sorry. The dispatch said the suite was empty. There was a climate control malfunction. I announced myself twice. I didn't know anyone was..." "Get out." Her voice was low, controlled, but Ethan could hear the tremor beneath it. "Get out right now." "I'm leaving. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean..." Then the world exploded into sound and light. Alarms shrieked from every direction, high-pitched, urgent, designed to disorient and intimidate. Red emergency lights began strobing in the corridor outside, turning everything into a nightmare of pulsing crimson shadows. Ethan stumbled backward, his tool belt catching on the doorframe, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. What's happening?" he shouted over the cacophony. But Vivian Hale wasn't looking at him anymore. Her gaze had fixed on something over his shoulder, and the fear in her eyes had transformed into something else. Resignation mixed with exhaustion, as if this was a play she'd performed before and hated the script. Ethan turned. 4 security guards filled the doorway to the suite, their postures aggressive, hands hovering near the weapons on their belts. The lead guard, a man built like a concrete wall with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite, pointed directly at Ethan. "Step away from Ms. Hale immediately. Hands where I can see them." "I'm maintenance." Ethan's voice came out higher than he intended, panic clawing at his throat. "I'm just here to fix the thermostat. Check the work order." "Hands up, now," Ethan complied, his arms shooting up so fast his tool belt jingled. His diagnostic tablet clattered to the floor, the screen cracking as it hit the marble. "Please, there's been a mistake. I was sent here by dispatch. I have authorization." The lead guard moved forward with frightening speed, his hand closing around Ethan's arm like a vice. "You're going to come with us very quietly, or this gets much worse for you." "Wait." Ethan tried to turn back toward Vivian, to appeal to her, to make her understand that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. "Ms. Hale, please, tell them—" But when his eyes found her again, she had stepped back into the shadows of the changing room, the blouse now held in front of her like a shield. Her face was unreadable, shut down, transformed into the mask of the CEO who negotiated billion-dollar deals and fired entire divisions without blinking. She said nothing. "Let's go," the guard growled, pulling Ethan toward the door. "My tools!" Ethan gestured helplessly toward his toolbox, his tablet, the pieces of his livelihood scattered across expensive carpet. "They'll be cataloged as evidence. Move." Evidence. The word hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Evidence of what? He'd done nothing wrong. He'd followed a work order, announced himself, tried to do his job. How had a simple maintenance call turned into this? The guards marched him down the corridor, one on each side gripping his arms, 2 following behind. The alarm had stopped, but the silence that replaced it was somehow worse, heavy with judgment, with the weight of consequences he couldn't yet see but could feel approaching like a storm. They took him to a security office on the 44th floor, a windowless room with white walls, a metal table, and chairs that looked designed for discomfort. One of the guards pushed him down into a seat while another positioned himself by the door, arms crossed, expression carved from stone. "Stay here. Don't move. Don't touch anything. Someone will be with you shortly to sort this out." "Sort what out?" Ethan's voice cracked. "I didn't do anything wrong. Check the dispatch logs. Check my badge authorization. I was sent there." The door closed, cutting off his words. A lock clicked into place. Ethan sat in the chair, his legs suddenly weak, his hands trembling. He pressed his palms flat against the metal table, trying to ground himself, trying to think. What had just happened? He'd walked in on his boss. No, not his boss. His boss's 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 boss. The woman who owned the building, the company, possibly half the city. He'd seen her in a vulnerable moment, caught her by surprise in a private space. But he hadn't meant to. He'd followed procedure. He'd announced himself. He'd been cleared by dispatch. Hadn't he? Doubt crept in like cold water. Had he heard the dispatch correctly? Had he entered the right suite? 4507, that's what they'd said, wasn't it? Or had he misheard? Had he been so eager to finish the job and get home to Sophie that he'd made a catastrophic mistake? No, his badge had worked. The reader had beeped green. You couldn't enter an unauthorized area with a badge scan. The system didn't work that way. So why were they treating him like a criminal? Time became elastic in that room. Ethan had no watch, no phone. Those were in his locker in the basement. The security guards had taken his radio. He had no way to tell Mrs. Chen he'd be late, no way to call Sophie, no way to explain that Daddy wasn't coming home right on time tonight because something had gone terribly, impossibly wrong. He thought of his daughter's face when she got worried, the way her lower lip would tremble, the way she'd clutch her stuffed elephant, the last gift her mother had given her before walking out of their lives forever. Sophie had abandonment issues, the pediatric psychologist said. She needed stability, consistency, predictability. Ethan provided those things. It was all he could provide. He wasn't rich. He couldn't give her private schools or fancy vacations or a house in the suburbs. But he could give her a father who showed up, who kept his promises. who came home. And now he was locked in a room, under suspicion for something he didn't understand, unable to even tell his daughter he'd be late. The door opened. Ethan's head snapped up, hope flaring briefly before dying when he saw it was just another security officer, this one older, with gray at his temples and the flat, evaluating gaze of someone who'd seen everything and trusted nothing. Ethan Rowe, maintenance technician, 3 years with the company, clean record. The man read from a tablet as he walked in, not bothering to look at Ethan. Says here you're a single father, one dependent, live over in Greenwood. Yes, sir. Ethan's throat was dry. Sir, I need to call my daughter. She's expecting me home, and her babysitter. We're reviewing security footage now, dispatch logs, badge access records. The man finally looked up, his eyes cold. Do you want to tell me your version of what happened up there? My version? Ethan's voice rose despite his efforts to stay calm. There's only one version. I was sent to fix a climate control issue. I scanned my badge, entered the suite, announced myself twice, and proceeded to check the thermostat. I heard a sound from the interior room, called out again, and when I entered to make sure no one needed assistance with the temperature malfunction, I found Ms. Hale. I immediately apologized and was backing out when the alarms went off. That's it. That's what happened. The security officer studied him for a long moment. The suite was supposed to be empty. That's what I thought too. That's why I entered. Ms. Hale has specific protocols around her privacy and security, very specific protocols. Those protocols were violated tonight. I didn't violate anything. I followed a work order, checked with dispatch. They'll confirm everything I'm saying. The man made a note on his tablet, his stylus scratching against the screen. The climate control system in Suite 4507 is functioning perfectly. There was no malfunction. Ethan felt the floor drop out from under him. What? That's impossible. The thermostat was flickering between temperatures. I saw it with my own eyes. According to our diagnostics, the system has been operating within normal parameters all evening. There was no work order for that location. But dispatch told me... Ethan stopped, his mind racing. Check the radio logs. The conversation is recorded. It has to be. We are checking everything, Mr. Rowe. Trust me on that. The security officer leaned forward, placing both hands on the table. Here's what concerns me. A maintenance worker with building access, who knows the security systems, who knows the executive floor layout, claims he was sent on a work order that doesn't exist, to a suite that should have been empty, but happened to contain our CEO in a vulnerable moment. What would you think if you were in my position? The implication hit Ethan like a slap. You think I planned this? You think I deliberately went up there to... He couldn't even finish the sentence. The accusation was so absurd, so vile. Why would I do that? For what possible reason? Money, usually. Blackmail, corporate espionage. There are people who would pay quite a lot for information about Vivian Hale, for photographs, for leverage. I don't have any photographs. Check my pockets, check everything. I would never... Ethan's voice broke. He could hear how desperate he sounded, how guilty desperation could appear to someone looking for confirmation of their suspicions. Please. I have a little girl. I have a life. I came to work today just like every other day. I did my job. I don't know why this happened, but I swear to you, I didn't plan anything. The security officer's expression didn't change. Wait here. He left. The door locked again. Ethan put his head in his hands, his breath coming in short gasps. This couldn't be happening. This was the kind of thing that happened to other people. People who made bad choices or lived reckless lives. Not to him. He was careful. He followed rules. He stayed invisible specifically to avoid situations like this. But invisibility offered no protection when you accidentally stumbled into the wrong room at the wrong time. Minutes or hours later, Ethan had lost all sense of time. The door opened again. He looked up, expecting the security officer. Instead, a woman in an expensive suit entered, carrying a slim leather portfolio. She had the kind of polished appearance that spoke of corner offices and six-figure salaries, her dark hair pulled back in a style that was both professional and severe. Mr. Rowe, I'm Elizabeth Hale, General Counsel for Hale Industries. I need to ask you some questions. A lawyer. They'd sent a lawyer. Ethan's stomach dropped. I should probably have a lawyer too then. That is absolutely your right. However, I'm not here in an adversarial capacity at the moment. I'm simply trying to establish the facts of what occurred tonight. You're not under arrest, you're not being charged with anything, but we do need to understand what happened. Ethan searched her face for clues about his fate. She was giving nothing away, her expression neutral, professional. The security officer said there was no work order, but I swear, dispatch called me. They gave me the suite number, the access code, everything. Elizabeth opened her portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This is a transcript of all radio communications from the dispatch station this evening. Your name appears 3 times. None of those communications involve Suite 4507 or the executive level. She slid the paper across the table. Ethan stared at it, his eyes scanning the lines of text, searching for the conversation he knew had happened. But she was right. There was nothing. The last entry with his name was from an hour earlier, confirming completion of the basement electrical inspection. That's impossible, he whispered. I remember the conversation. I remember every word. Do you use any medications, Mr. Rowe? Anything that might affect memory or perception? No, I'm not. I didn't imagine this. Someone called me on that radio. Someone gave me that work order. Elizabeth made a note. Your badge access shows you entered the executive level elevator at 6:47 p.m. You were granted temporary access credentials at 6:45 p.m. Those credentials were uploaded to your badge from a terminal in the security office. Hope flared in Ethan's chest. See? That proves someone authorized me to go up there. It proves someone with access to the security system uploaded credentials to your badge. What it doesn't prove is who or why. Elizabeth's gaze sharpened. Mr. Rowe, do you have any enemies in this company? Anyone who might want to cause problems for you? Enemies? No. I barely know anyone outside my department. I keep to myself, do my work, go home. That's it. What about Ms. Hale? Have you had any previous interactions with her? Any reason to seek her attention or wish her harm? I've never even seen her before tonight. Ethan's voice rose. I mean, I've seen her picture in the company newsletter, but that's it. I don't travel in the same world as people like her. Why would I? Elizabeth studied him for a long moment, her eyes calculating. Then she closed her portfolio with a soft snap. Here's the situation, Mr. Rowe. Someone orchestrated what happened tonight. Someone with knowledge of security protocols, access to the badge system, and the technical ability to spoof radio communications. That someone created a scenario that placed you in Suite 4507 at the exact moment Ms. Hale was there. The question is whether that someone was you or whether you were used as an unwitting instrument. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan's mind reeled. Someone had done this deliberately? Someone had used him as a weapon against Vivian Hale? Who would do that, and why? That's what we need to determine. Elizabeth stood, smoothing her suit jacket. You're free to go for now, Mr. Rowe, but you're suspended from duty pending the outcome of our investigation. You'll surrender your badge and building access. You'll make yourself available for further questioning if needed, and you will not, under any circumstances, attempt to contact Ms. Hale or anyone on the executive floor. Do you understand? I'm suspended, but I didn't do anything wrong. You were present in a private suite without authorization, regardless of how you came to be there. That's a serious security breach. Until we establish definitively what happened, you cannot continue working in this building. I'm sorry, but this is non-negotiable. Ethan felt his world crumbling. The job paid his rent, Sophie's childcare, her health insurance. He had maybe 2 weeks of savings if he stretched every dollar until it screamed. How long will the investigation take? As long as necessary. Could be days. Could be longer. Elizabeth walked to the door, then paused. Something that might have been sympathy flickering across her professional mask. For what it's worth, Mr. Rowe, your record is spotless. You've never had so much as a minor policy violation in 3 years. That counts for something. But this situation is delicate, and we need to be absolutely certain about what happened before any decisions are made about your employment. She left. A different security guard appeared moments later to escort Ethan back to the basement level. They collected his personal belongings from his locker, his phone, wallet, jacket, the lunchbox Sophie had decorated with stickers. They took his badge, his radio, his keys to the maintenance rooms he'd accessed 1,000 times. They walked him out through the loading dock, avoiding the main lobby where his coworkers might see, where questions might be asked. The rain had intensified, turning the Seattle evening into a gray wall of water that soaked through Ethan's jacket in seconds. He stood on the loading dock, staring at the city lights that blurred through the downpour, and pulled out his phone. 7 missed calls from Mrs. Chen. 4 text messages from her. "Sophie is asking about you. Is everything okay? Please call when you can. Sophie is very worried." His hands shook as he dialed. Mrs. Chen answered on the first ring. "Ethan, oh, thank goodness. Sophie has been beside herself. What happened?" "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Chen. There was a situation at work and I couldn't call. I'm on my way home now. Is she okay?" "She's scared, Ethan. She thought, well, you know how she gets when routines change." I know. Can I talk to her?" There was rustling, then Sophie's small voice, thick with tears. "Daddy?" The word broke something inside him. Ethan closed his eyes against the rain, against the sting of tears he hadn't earned the right to shed yet. "Hey, baby girl. I'm so sorry I'm late. There was a problem at work, but it's all fixed now, and I'm coming home, okay? You promise?" "I promise, 20 minutes tops, and we'll have pizza for dinner, extra cheese, just how you like it." He could hear her breathing slowing, the panic receding. "Okay, Daddy, but hurry." "Fast as I can, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too." The line went dead. Ethan stood in the rain, suspended from the job that kept his daughter safe, accused of a crime he didn't commit, caught in something he didn't understand but could already feel tightening around him like a noose. And somewhere 45 floors above, in a tower he could no longer enter, Vivian Hale stood at her window watching the rain, her arms crossed over herself in that same defensive posture, her mind racing through possibilities and threats, and the bitter realization that her carefully constructed walls had been breached again. She had seen the confusion in the maintenance man's eyes, the genuine shock, the desperate apologies. She had also seen something else, the way security had responded with unusual speed, the way the alarms had been triggered so precisely, the way the whole incident felt orchestrated with a precision that spoke of intimate knowledge of her routines and vulnerabilities. Someone had used that man as a weapon against her, which meant someone inside her company knew too much. And whatever was coming next, Vivian knew with cold certainty this was only the beginning. The rain followed Ethan home like an accusation, drumming against the windshield of his aging Honda with a relentless rhythm that matched the panic still coursing through his veins. Traffic lights blurred into watercolor smears of red and green, and twice he almost missed his turn because his mind was somewhere else. Trapped in that moment when Vivian Hale's eyes had locked with his, fear and fury mingling into something he couldn't name but would never forget. Sophie was waiting at the window when he pulled up to their apartment building, her small face pressed against the glass, breath fogging the pain. The sight of her nearly undid him. He'd promised her stability, promised her a life where she never had to worry about whether Daddy would come home. And here he was, suspended, investigated, possibly about to lose everything they'd fought so hard to build. Mrs. Chen met him at the door, her weathered face creased with concern. She was in her 70s, a widow who'd lived in the building longer than Ethan had been alive, and she'd been a lifeline since his wife left. "She cried for an hour," Mrs. Chen said quietly, so Sophie wouldn't hear. "I'm not judging Ethan, but she needs to know she can count on you." "I know." The words came out rough. "Thank you for staying with her. I'll get your payment tomorrow. Don't worry about that now, just take care of your girl." Sophie launched herself at him the moment he entered the apartment, her arms wrapping around his waist with desperate strength. "You're late. You're never late." Ethan knelt down, pulling her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "I know, baby. I'm so sorry. Something unexpected happened at work, but everything's okay now." "You promise?" Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. He held her tighter, this small person who trusted him completely, who believed his promises even when the world was busy proving they could shatter like glass. "I promise." That night, after pizza that tasted like cardboard in his mouth, and a bedtime story he read on autopilot, Ethan sat in the dark living room and stared at his phone. He'd received one email from Hale Industries HR confirming his suspension and outlining the conditions. No contact with company personnel. No discussion of the incident with media or third parties. Continued violation of these terms would result in immediate termination and possible legal action. Legal action. The words made his hands shake. He opened his banking app and did math he already knew the answer to. Rent was due in 12 days. Sophie's childcare payment was due in 6. He had enough for one. Maybe both if he didn't eat and nothing else went wrong. But if the investigation dragged on for weeks, if they decided to fire him without cause, if his name got dragged through whatever corporate scandal was unfolding, Ethan closed his eyes and forced himself to breathe. He'd been through worse. When Maria left, when she'd packed her bags and walked out with barely a goodbye to their 5-year-old daughter, he'd thought the world was ending, but he'd survive that. He'd figure this out too. He had to. Sophie was counting on him. 47 floors above the city, in an office that still smelled faintly of the jasmine tea she'd been drinking when everything went wrong, Vivian Hale sat at her desk and watched security footage for the 7th time. The timestamp read 6:47 p.m. Camera angle. Executive corridor, 45th floor. Ethan Rowe emerged from the elevator, tool belt visible, posture uncertain. He walked slowly down the corridor, checking door numbers, clearly looking for suite 4507. When he found it, he paused. His lips moved, announcing himself, though there was no audio on this feed. He scanned his badge. The light turned green. He entered. Vivian paused the footage and pulled up a second screen. Badge access logs. Ethan Rowe's credentials had been modified at 6:45 p.m., granting temporary executive-level clearance. The modification had been made from a security terminal in the basement guard station, logged under the credentials of Marcus Webb, a night shift security officer. She pulled up a third screen. Radio dispatch logs. Nothing. No record of any communication with Ethan Rowe about Suite 4507 or climate control issues. Vivian sat back in her chair, fingers drumming against the armrest, mind moving through the puzzle with the same ruthless efficiency she'd applied to every problem since she'd clawed her way out of a childhood that still visited her in nightmares. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone with access, knowledge, and a reason to want her vulnerable. The question was why. Her intercom buzzed. "Ms. Hale? I know it's late, but Marcus Webb is here. Security brought him up as you requested." Vivian pressed the button. "Send him in." The security guard who entered looked more confused than worried, his expression that of a man who'd been pulled from his dinner break without explanation. He was in his 50s, average build, with the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting. "Ma'am? They said you wanted to see me?" "Sit down, Marcus." Vivian gestured to the chair across from her desk, noting the way he glanced around the office. Not nervous, just curious, like he'd never been up here before. "Do you know why you're here?" "No, ma'am. I mean, they mentioned something about badge access protocols, but I follow all procedures. I've never had a write-up in 8 years. According to our logs, at 6:45 p.m. tonight, you used your credentials to modify the badge access for an employee named Ethan Rowe. You granted him temporary clearance to the executive level. Do you remember doing that?" Marcus's eyebrows rose. "I absolutely did not do that, ma'am. I wasn't even at my station at that time. I was doing rounds on the parking levels. It's logged in my patrol schedule." Vivian already knew this. She'd checked. "Someone used your credentials, Marcus, your password, your security codes. Who else has access to those?" "No one. I mean, that's the whole point of security protocols, right? Each guard has unique credentials." He paused, thinking. "But anyone with admin access to the system could theoretically log in as any of us. IT support, senior security management, maybe some of the executive access people. Give me names." "It would be Paul Chen and Samantha Rodriguez. They run the overnight systems monitoring. Senior security is Chief Davidson and Deputy Chief Martinez. Executive access..." He trailed off, uncertainty flickering across his face. "Say it." "Your brother, ma'am. James Hale. He has master override credentials for all building systems." The name hung in the air like poison gas. Vivian's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes went very cold. "Thank you, Marcus. You can go. And I'd appreciate your discretion about this conversation." "Of course, ma'am." After he left, Vivian sat in the silence of her office and allowed herself one moment of weakness, pressing her palms against her eyes. breathing through the tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with physical pain and everything to do with old wounds that never quite healed. James. Of course it would come back to James, her younger brother by 3 years, charming where she was reserved, reckless where she was careful. He'd been given a position in the company because family loyalty demanded it, had been granted access and authority because their father had insisted on it before he died. And he'd resented Vivian for every day of her success, every board meeting where she outmaneuvered him, every decision that proved she was better at this than he would ever be. But would he go this far? Would he orchestrate something this cruel, this invasive, knowing what it would trigger in her? Yes, Vivian thought, with the bitter clarity of someone who'd learned not to underestimate malice disguised as family. Yes, he would. Her phone buzzed. Elizabeth Hale, the company's general counsel and Vivian's only real ally in the executive suite. I saw the badge logs, Elizabeth said without preamble. It's not looking good for the maintenance worker. The evidence suggests either he planned this or someone set him up. Either way, termination is the safest corporate response. No. There was a pause. Vivian, he was in your private suite while you were vulnerable. Protocol demands? Protocol demands we find out who actually did this, not scapegoat the first convenient target. Betty, Vivian's voice was sharp. Look at the pattern, Elizabeth. Perfect timing, sophisticated technical manipulation, knowledge of my schedule. This wasn't some maintenance worker trying to get photographs for a tabloid. This was someone who knows me, who knows this company, who knows exactly what buttons to push. You think it's internal. I know it's internal. And until we find out who and why, Ethan Rowe is the only connection we have to them. We need to keep him close, not cast him out. Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment. You want to pull him closer? Vivian, that's risky. If he is involved, he's not. I saw his face. That was genuine shock, genuine fear. Someone used him. Vivian stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked city below. Bring him back. Assign him directly to the executive floor. I want him where I can watch him, where whoever did this can see we're not following their script. The board will have questions. The board doesn't run this company. I do. Vivian's tone left no room for argument. Make it happen, Elizabeth, and do it quietly. 3 days passed in a kind of suspended agony for Ethan. He took Sophie to school, picked her up, made meals, read stories, and pretended everything was normal while his phone stayed silent and his savings account dwindled. He'd started looking at job postings, though the thought of starting over somewhere else, of rebuilding from zero again, made him feel physically ill. On the 4th morning, his phone finally rang. Unknown number. Mr. Rowe? This is Elizabeth Hale from Hale Industries. We need to meet. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. Am I being fired? No, it's more complicated than that. Can you come to the office this afternoon, 2 o'clock? Use the visitor entrance and ask for me specifically. I don't understand. You suspended me pending investigation. Has something changed? Everything has changed, Mr. Rowe. We'll explain when you get here. She hung up before he could ask anything else. Ethan called Mrs. Chen, arranged for her to pick Sophie up from school, and spent 2 hours pacing his apartment trying to imagine what everything has changed could possibly mean. Had they found who set him up? Had they discovered proof he was innocent? Or was this some corporate HR trick, a way to get him to resign quietly without filing wrongful termination claims? The Hale Tower looked different in daylight, less intimidating, just another building in a city full of them. But Ethan's hands still shook as he signed in at the visitor desk, accepted the temporary badge, and rode the elevator up to the 23rd floor, where Elizabeth Hale's office occupied a corner suite with views that probably cost more than his annual salary. She was waiting for him, professional and unreadable in a navy suit that looked like it had been tailored specifically for her. Mr. Rowe, thank you for coming. Please, sit. Ethan sat, gripping the arms of the leather chair like it might decide to eject him at any moment. You said everything changed. What does that mean? Elizabeth pulled a file from her desk and opened it, scanning the contents as she spoke. Our investigation uncovered evidence that you were set up. Someone with extensive knowledge of building systems and security protocols created a fake work order, modified your badge access, and timed everything to place you in Suite 4507 at a specific moment. You were used, Mr. Rowe. The question now is by whom and for what purpose? Relief and anger flooded through Ethan in equal measure. I told you I didn't do anything wrong. I told everyone. You did. And we believe you. However, this creates a new problem. Elizabeth closed the file and met his eyes directly. Someone in this company wanted to create a situation that would compromise Ms. Hale's privacy and security. Someone with resources and access. We need to find out who before they try again. What does that have to do with me? You know I'm innocent now. Give me my job back and I'll stay out of whatever corporate politics are happening up there. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Elizabeth leaned forward, her expression intent. You're the only direct connection we have to whoever orchestrated this. They used your credentials, your work schedule, your clearance, which means they might try to use you again, or they might try to eliminate you as a loose end. Either way, you're involved whether you want to be or not. The word sent ice down Ethan's spine. Eliminate? You're saying someone might try to hurt me. I'm saying we don't know what we're dealing with yet, and until we do, you're potentially at risk, which is why Ms. Hale has requested something unusual. Ethan waited, afraid to even guess what was coming. She wants you back on the executive floor, assigned directly to maintain the systems there, under close supervision. It's a promotion in title and pay, and it puts you in a position where we can keep you safe while we investigate. Ethan stared at her. You want me to work on the same floor where I supposedly committed a security breach? Where the incident happened? That doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense if you understand the strategy. Whoever did this expected you to be fired, discredited, maybe even prosecuted. By keeping you employed and elevating your position, we're sending a message that their plan failed. And if they try again, we'll be watching. You want to use me as bait. Elizabeth didn't deny it. We want to protect our CEO and find whoever is threatening her. You can help us do that. And in return, you get job security, a substantial raise, and the assurance that when this is over, your record will be completely clear. Any reference checks, any background inquiries, they'll see nothing but an exemplary employee who is trusted with sensitive responsibilities. Ethan's mind raced. A raise would solve his financial problems. Job security would let Sophie have the stability she needed. But working on the executive floor, potentially in proximity to Vivian Hale after what happened. Does she know about this plan? Ms. Hale, is she okay with having me there? It was her idea, Mr. Rowe. She specifically requested you. That information hit Ethan harder than anything else. Vivian Hale, the woman he'd seen in her most vulnerable moment, the woman whose fear he'd witnessed, wanted him close. Either she truly believed he was innocent, or this was an elaborate trap he was too desperate to see through. I have a daughter, Ethan said slowly. She's 7. Her mother left us, and she has anxiety about people disappearing. If this puts me in danger, if something happens to me because I'm caught up in some corporate power struggle, we will do everything possible to ensure your safety. That's not an empty promise, Mr. Rowe. Ms. Hale takes this very seriously. Ethan thought of his dwindling bank account, the rent notice that would come in 8 days, Sophie's face when he'd promised her everything would be okay. He thought of the alternative, rejecting this offer and trying to find work somewhere else with a suspension on his record, even if they claimed it would be cleared later. What exactly would I be doing? On the executive floor. Standard maintenance work, but with exclusive access to the executive suite systems. Climate control, electrical, security integration monitoring. You'd report directly to building operations, but you'd also be logging any anomalies, any unusual access requests, anything that seems out of place. And you'd be attending regular briefings with security. When would this start? Tomorrow, if you accept. Your salary would increase by 40% with immediate effect. And Mr. Rowe? Elizabeth's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I've seen the footage from that night. I know you announced yourself, followed procedure, tried to do the right thing. You got caught in something that wasn't your fault. This is a chance to help make it right. Ethan closed his eyes and saw Sophie's face, heard her asking him to promise he'd come home. 40% more salary could change their lives. Could mean a bigger apartment, better childcare, maybe even saving for her future instead of just surviving day to day. I'll do it, he said finally. But I have conditions. I need to be able to leave exactly at 6 p.m. unless there's an absolute emergency. My daughter depends on that routine. And I want everything documented, every order I'm given, every task I complete. If this goes wrong, I need proof I was following instructions. That's more than fair. We'll put it all in writing. Elizabeth stood, extending her hand. Welcome back, Mr. Rowe. Report to the executive floor reception at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Someone will be there to orient you. The handshake felt like sealing a deal with implications he couldn't fully understand yet. But Ethan shook anyway because sometimes the only way forward was through, even when you couldn't see where the path led. That evening, he told Sophie they were celebrating. He took her to the pizza place with the arcade games she loved, let her play until her quarters ran out, and watched her laugh without shadows in her eyes. When she asked why they were celebrating, he said his job had gotten better, which was technically true, even if it wasn't anywhere close to the full truth. Does this mean we can get a puppy? She asked hopefully. Not yet, baby, but maybe someday soon. She accepted this with the resilience of a child who'd learned to take what she could get. I'm glad you're not sad anymore, Daddy. You were sad before. Ethan pulled her close, breathing in her strawberry shampoo, feeling the weight of everything he was trying to protect. I'm okay, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the executive floor reception exactly at 8 a.m., badge scanning him through with a quiet beep that somehow sounded different than before, more permanent, more consequential. The receptionist, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and perfectly styled hair, smiled at him. You must be Ethan Rowe. I'm Amanda Pierce. I'll be your primary contact for scheduling and coordination. She handed him a tablet and a new badge. This has your updated credentials and access permissions. You'll have clearance for all executive floor maintenance areas, including the private suites, but with the following conditions. You must announce yourself at every entry, you must log every access in this tablet, and you must never enter any space where the privacy indicator is active. Understood? Understood. Your workstation is down the hall, third door on the left. It's a small office, but it has everything you'll need: tools, diagnostic equipment, direct access to the building management system. Chief Davidson from security wants to brief you at 9, and she paused, something flickering across her professional mask. Ms. Hale requested that you stop by her office at 10. Don't be late. Ethan's stomach dropped. She wants to see me? Apparently. I don't ask questions above my pay grade, and I'd suggest you follow that policy too. Amanda's smile was sympathetic. Look, I don't know what happened last week, but the gossip mill has been working overtime. My advice? Do your job, stay professional, and don't give anyone ammunition. The executive floor can be complicated. Complicated how? But Amanda was already turning to answer a ringing phone, the conversation clearly over. Ethan found his new office, a space barely larger than a closet, but with a window, which was more than he'd had in the basement, and spent an hour familiarizing himself with the systems. Everything was more sophisticated up here, more integrated. The building management software gave him access to real-time data on every system in the executive suites, temperature controls, lighting, security integration points. It was fascinating in a way that made him forget, temporarily, the strangeness of his situation. Chief Davidson arrived at exactly 9, a stern man in his 60s who looked like he'd spent his career not trusting anyone and wasn't about to start now. Rowe, glad you're back. Here's what you need to know. Someone used our systems against us, which means someone knows too much about how things work around here. Your job is to be our eyes and ears. You see anything unusual, anyone accessing systems they shouldn't, any modifications to code, any requests that don't make sense, you report it directly to me. Not your supervisor, not building operations. Me. Clear? Clear. You'll get a security briefing packet with details on what to watch for. Read it. Memorize it. This isn't paranoia, Rowe. Someone came after Ms. Hale, and they did it smart. We need to be smarter. Davidson fixed him with a hard stare. And between you and me, you got a raw deal last week, but you're getting a chance to help fix it. Don't waste it. After Davidson left, Ethan spent the next 45 minutes trying not to think about the 10 o'clock meeting. He organized tools he didn't need to organize, ran diagnostics on systems that didn't need diagnosing, and checked his phone 3 times to make sure Sophie's school hadn't called. At 9:55, he couldn't put it off any longer. He walked down the corridor to the corner office, his footsteps silent on the expensive carpet, and stopped at the frosted glass door with her name etched in elegant script. He knocked. Once. Twice. "Come in." Ethan opened the door and stepped into Vivian Hale's world. The office was smaller than he'd expected, more functional than ostentatious. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city sprawling below, but the furniture was understated. A desk, chairs, shelving filled with books that looked actually read rather than decorative. And behind the desk, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, was Vivian Hale herself. She looked different than she had that night. More composed, obviously, but also somehow younger. Her dark hair was pulled back. She wore a simple gray suit, and her eyes, those eyes that had held such raw fear, were calm now, assessing. "Mr. Rowe, please sit down." Ethan sat, his hands gripping his knees, unsure of proper protocol. "Did you apologize again? Did you wait for her to speak? Did you pretend nothing had happened?" Vivian made the decision for him. "I want to address what happened last week directly, because pretending it didn't happen would be insulting to both of us. You walked into a situation that never should have occurred. You saw me in a vulnerable moment, and then you were treated like a criminal for something you didn't do. I'm sorry." Of all the things Ethan had expected, an apology wasn't on the list. "Ma'am, you don't need to—" "I do, because what happened to you was wrong, and it was wrong because of choices I've made about privacy and security that created the conditions for this manipulation." She leaned forward slightly. "Someone used your credentials and your innocent intentions to get to me. That person is still out there, still a threat. I brought you back because I believe you can help us find them, but also because you deserve a chance to clear your name properly, not just on paper, but in reality." Ethan swallowed hard. "Elizabeth said this was your idea. The promotion, putting me on this floor. Why? Why risk having me close after what happened?" Vivian's expression flickered with something that might have been respect. "Because fear is a weapon, Mr. Rowe, and I refuse to let whoever did this use it against me. If I hide, if I treat you like a threat when you're clearly not, then they win. I won't give them that satisfaction." "But doesn't it bother you, having me here?" She was quiet for a moment, and Ethan saw the real answer behind her controlled facade. Yes, it bothered her. Yes, it took effort. But she was choosing to do it anyway. "What bothers me is that someone in my company betrayed me," Vivian said finally. "What bothers me is that someone used an innocent man as a weapon. What bothers me is that I've built walls so high around myself that I can't tell the difference between protection and prison anymore." She met his eyes directly. "You being here is uncomfortable, but uncomfortable doesn't mean wrong." Ethan felt something shift in his understanding of this woman. She wasn't just a billionaire CEO in an ivory tower. She was someone fighting battles he couldn't see, carrying weight he couldn't measure. "I'll do whatever I can to help," he said. "I have a daughter. I understand wanting to protect what matters." Something softened in Vivian's expression. "How old?" 7. Her name's Sophie. That's a good age. Still believes in magic, not yet cynical about the world. Most days. Other days she worries too much about things she shouldn't have to worry about. Ethan surprised himself by continuing. "Her mother left 2 years ago. Just walked out. Sophie's been anxious ever since. Needs routines, needs to know I'm coming home. That's why I have to leave at 6, no exceptions. I hope that's okay." "It's more than okay. Family comes first, Mr. Rowe. Always." Vivian stood, signaling the meeting was ending. "You'll be working closely with the executive floor team. If you notice anything unusual, anything at all, report it. And Mr. Rowe, thank you for helping me through the panic attack during the storm." Ethan stared at her, confused. There was no storm last week. The incident happened on a clear evening. Vivian's expression froze, then shifted into something carefully neutral. "Of course. My mistake. Mixing up events. That will be all." But Ethan saw the lie, saw the way she'd accidentally revealed something she hadn't meant to. There had been another incident, another moment of vulnerability, and she'd just told him more than she'd intended. He stood and walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "Miss Hale, for what it's worth, I hope we find whoever did this." Not just because it affected me, but because nobody deserves to feel unsafe in their own space. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Ethan left, closing the door softly behind him, and Vivian stood alone in her office, looking out at the city she'd conquered while trying to convince herself that letting people close wasn't the same thing as letting them hurt her. But trust, she knew, was always a gamble, and this particular bet was only just beginning. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal, which should have been Ethan's first warning that something was building beneath the surface. He arrived each morning at 8, checked systems that ran flawlessly, documented maintenance that rarely needed doing, and tried to ignore the weight of eyes that followed him through the executive corridors. The other employees knew something had happened, even if they didn't know what, and their curiosity manifested in stolen glances and conversations that died when he entered rooms. Amanda Pierce became his unlikely ally, teaching him the unspoken rules of executive floor politics over coffee that cost more per cup than his old hourly wage. James Hale's office is 3 doors down from his sister's, she told him one morning, her voice low. He comes in late, leaves early, and spends most of his time on the phone with people who aren't company business. Don't make eye contact if you can help it. He's the kind who remembers slights. Ethan had seen James exactly once, a man in his early 30s with the kind of polished appearance that came from never having worried about money. He'd walked past Ethan in the corridor without acknowledgement, as if maintenance workers existed in a dimension he couldn't perceive, but there had been something in his expression when he'd glanced at his sister's office door, something bitter and calculating that made Ethan's instincts flare with warning. "Why does he work here if he clearly doesn't want to?" Ethan asked. Amanda's smile was sad. Family obligation. Their father built this company, wanted both his children involved. But only one of them had the talent for it, and it wasn't James. He's VP of Strategic Development, which is corporate speak for a title without real power. It eats at him. Enough to do something about it? You're asking the wrong person. I just schedule meetings and pretend I don't hear things. But her eyes said she'd heard plenty, and none of it was good. Ethan filed the information away and returned to his small office, where his tablet blinked with a new notification. Automated alert. Temperature fluctuation detected in conference room 4520. He grabbed his tools and headed down the corridor, muscle memory taking over as he entered the room and approached the thermostat panel. The room was empty, floor-to-ceiling windows showing gray October skies that promised rain. Ethan opened the panel and ran his diagnostic, finding the issue quickly, a loose connection in the sensor array, probably from the recent system updates. Simple fix, 5 minutes of work. He was closing the panel when the lights went out, not just in the conference room. Through the windows, he could see the entire tower go dark, 47 floors of steel and glass suddenly lifeless. Emergency lighting kicked in after 3 seconds, bathing everything in an eerie red glow that made shadows leap and twist. Ethan's radio crackled. "All personnel, we have a building-wide power failure. Generator backup is active on critical systems only. Remain in your current locations until further notice." He moved toward the door, intending to return to his office, when he heard it. A sound from the corridor, faint but unmistakable. Someone breathing hard, fast, the kind of breathing that came with panic. Ethan stepped into the hallway and followed the sound. It led him to a door marked Conference Room 4525, Private. The breathing was coming from inside, louder now, interspersed with small sounds that might have been words but weren't quite coherent. He knocked softly. "Hello? Are you okay in there?" No answer, just that desperate breathing and a thud like someone hitting a wall. Ethan tried the handle. Locked. His badge wouldn't work without power to the electronic systems, but the breathing was getting worse, hyperventilating now, and every instinct screamed that someone was in trouble. "I'm going to get help," he called through the door. "Just hold on." "No." The word was barely audible, choked. "Don't. Can't." Ethan recognized that voice. His stomach dropped. "Ms. Hale, is that you?" A sound that might have been a scent, might have been a sob. Ethan pressed his ear against the door and heard her sliding down the wall, heard the edge of true panic in her breathing. She was trapped in there, and the darkness had triggered something in her that was beyond reason. He looked around desperately. The emergency lighting provided visibility but no power to the locks. His mind raced through options. Find security, but that could take 10 minutes in the chaos of a building-wide power failure. Call for help on his radio, but that would bring an audience to something Vivian clearly wanted private. Break the door, but that was mahogany that cost more than his car. Or use the maintenance override. Every conference room had a manual release on the inside, but there was also an external emergency access panel hidden in the corridor wall panels. It was against protocol to use it without authorization, could get him fired if this went wrong. But that breathing through the door was getting worse, and Ethan couldn't just stand there and do nothing. He found the panel 3 feet from the door, pried it open with his multi-tool, and triggered the manual release. The lock clicked open with a sound like a gunshot in the quiet corridor. Ethan pushed the door open slowly, calling out as he entered. "Miss Hale, it's Ethan Rowe from maintenance. I'm coming in to help. Just me? Nobody else." The conference room was larger than the others, clearly meant for important meetings. And in the corner, illuminated by the red emergency lights, Vivian Hale sat with her back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, hands pressed over her ears, eyes squeezed shut. She looked nothing like the composed CEO he'd spoken with weeks ago. She looked terrified, lost in something that existed only in her mind but was no less real for that. Ethan crouched several feet away, keeping his distance, keeping his voice low and steady. "Ms. Hale, my name is Ethan. I'm here to help. You're safe. The power went out, that's all. Just a technical failure. Emergency crews are working on it right now." No response. Her breathing was ragged, her whole body shaking. "I have a daughter named Sophie," Ethan continued, using the same voice he used when Sophie woke from nightmares. "She's 7 years old and she gets scared sometimes too. When she does, I tell her to focus on 5 things she can see, 4 things she can touch, 3 things she can hear. It helps her brain remember where she really is. Would you like to try that?" Vivian's eyes opened slightly, unfocused, but some awareness flickered there. 5 things you can see," Ethan said gently. "Take your time, there's no rush. What can you see right now?" Her voice came out rough, broken. Red lights. "Good, that's 1. What else?" The table. Conference table." "Perfect, that's 2. 3 more. You're doing great." Slowly, painfully, Vivian worked through the list. The chairs, the windows, Ethan himself sitting across from her like he had all the time in the world. By the time she reached the touching exercise, the wall behind her, the fabric of her jacket, the cold floor, her breathing had started to even out. 3 things you can hear," Ethan prompted. "Your voice." She paused, listening. "The building. The wind outside." Another pause. "My own heartbeat." "That's 4. You get bonus points." Ethan's lips quirked into a small smile. "How are you feeling now?" Vivian was quiet for a long moment, her eyes closed again, but this time in concentration rather than panic. "Embarrassed, angry at myself, grateful you're here, confused about why you're here. Power failure trapped you in a locked room. I heard you from the corridor and used the emergency override to get the door open. Probably broke about 6 protocols doing it, but I figured your safety was more important than my job security. You keep making that choice." Vivian's voice was steadier now, though she hadn't moved from her position against the wall. "Helping me at your own risk. Not really a choice when someone needs help. It's just what you do. Most people don't." She finally looked at him directly, and Ethan saw exhaustion in her eyes that went beyond this incident. Most people see weakness and exploit it, or they see it and turn away because it makes them uncomfortable. I'm not most people. I'm just a guy who fixes broken things. And right now, the thing that's broken is the power grid. So if you're feeling steadier, I should probably go see what I can do about that. Wait! Vivian pushed herself to her feet, using the wall for support, and Ethan stood too, ready to catch her if she faltered. But she steadied herself, brushing invisible dust from her suit in a gesture that was pure habit. You can't tell anyone about this, about what you saw. I wasn't planning to. I'm serious, Ethan. If word gets out that I have panic attacks, that I'm vulnerable like this, the board will use it against me. My brother will use it against me. I've worked too hard to let this ruin everything. Then it stays between us. I swear. Ethan met her eyes. But Ms. Hale, Having panic attacks doesn't make you weak. It makes you human, and there's no shame in being human. Something in her expression cracked, just slightly, before she rebuilt the walls. You should go. Check the power systems. I'll be fine. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to make sure she was really okay, but he recognized dismissal when he heard it. He moved toward the door, then paused. The grounding exercise I used, it really does help Sophie when she's scared. If this happens again when I'm not around, maybe try it. 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, 1 you can taste. It reminds your brain where you really are instead of where the fear tells you you are. Thank you, Vivian said quietly. And Ethan, thank you for not making this harder than it had to be. He left her there, closing the door softly behind him, and made his way through the red-lit corridors toward the building operations center. His mind was already compartmentalizing what had happened, filing it away under things we don't talk about, right next to every other private moment he'd witnessed in 3 years of maintenance work. People forgot that maintenance workers saw everything. They forgot that invisible people heard conversations, witnessed breakdowns, knew secrets. Ethan had learned early to develop selective blindness, to be present but not intrusive, helpful but not presumptuous. It was a survival skill in a world where knowing too much could get you fired faster than knowing too little. The power came back 20 minutes later, the building thrumming back to life with a sound like a giant taking breath. Emergency protocols were lifted, and staff returned to normal operations with the kind of efficiency that came from expensive disaster planning. Ethan returned to his office and logged the incident, power failure, duration, emergency override used on conference room 4525 due to personnel safety concerns. He didn't mention who the personnel was. He didn't mention what he'd seen, just the facts, clinical and dry. His radio buzzed. "Roe, Chief Davidson wants to see you. His office, now." Ethan's stomach tightened. Had someone seen him enter that conference room? Had Vivian changed her mind about keeping this quiet? He made his way to Davidson's office, each step feeling heavier than the last. Davidson was waiting with another man Ethan didn't recognize, mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Ro, this is Daniel Park from our cybersecurity division. He has some questions about the power failure." Cybersecurity? Ethan's confusion was genuine. It was a power failure. What does that have to do with digital security? Park leaned against Davidson's desk, his posture casual but his attention laser-focused. Because the failure wasn't random. Someone hacked into our building management system and triggered a controlled shutdown. Very sophisticated, very targeted. They disabled backup systems, overrode safety protocols, and created a situation where certain areas of the building would be isolated and vulnerable. The implications hit Ethan like cold water. "You think this was another attack?" "We know it was another attack," Davidson said grimly. "And just like last time, it involved manipulation of systems you have access to, which means either you're the unluckiest employee in company history, or someone's very interested in making you look guilty." "Or I am guilty," Ethan said flatly. "That's what you're thinking, isn't it?" Park shook his head. "Actually, no. Your login credentials weren't used anywhere near the hack. The attack came from an external connection that piggybacked on our vendor maintenance portal. Clever, hard to trace, and way beyond the skill level of a building maintenance technician. No offense?" "None taken. So why am I here?" "Because you used an emergency override to access conference room 4525 during the blackout," Davidson said. "That room wasn't on any work order. You weren't supposed to be there, which means either you stumbled onto something or you were led there. Either way, we need to know what you saw." Ethan chose his words carefully. "I heard someone in distress. I used the override to check if they needed help. When I confirmed they were okay, I left and went to help with the power restoration. That's it." "Who was in the room?" "I didn't ask for identification. I just made sure they were safe and left." Park and Davidson exchanged glances. "You're protecting someone," Park said. "Look, I get it, but if this attack was designed to trap someone specific in that room, we need to know who and why." "Then ask them directly. I'm maintenance, not security. I fixed what I could fix and moved on." Davidson's jaw tightened. "Ro, this is serious. Someone is actively targeting this company and possibly specific individuals. If you know something, I know that someone needed help and I helped them. That's all I'm going to say without a lawyer present or a direct order from someone with the authority to give me one. The room fell silent. Ethan could see Davidson calculating whether to push harder, whether to make this an official interrogation instead of a voluntary interview. Finally, the security chief sighed. Fine, but you're now officially a person of interest in an ongoing security investigation. That means your access logs will be monitored, your communications reviewed, your movements tracked. If whoever's doing this tries to use you again, we'll know. And Roe, next time someone asks you a direct question about a security incident, I'd suggest you answer it. Loyalty is admirable. Obstruction is grounds for termination. Understood, sir. Ethan left the office feeling like he'd just walked through a minefield blindfolded. He'd kept Vivian's secret, but at what cost? If they were monitoring him now, watching his every move, how long before they noticed interactions between him and Vivian that couldn't be explained by maintenance work alone? The answer came sooner than he expected. That evening, as Ethan was preparing to leave at exactly 6 p.m., his tablet pinged with a message. Private communication from V. Hale. Meeting requested, 6:15 p.m., my office, 20 minutes maximum. I know your schedule. This is important. Ethan stared at the screen, weighing options. He'd promised Sophie consistency, promised to always be home by 6:30. But Vivian wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent, and 20 minutes still gave him a buffer. He called Mrs. Chen. I'm going to be about 30 minutes late tonight. Work emergency. Can Sophie stay with you a little longer? Of course, Ethan, but try not to make it a habit. She worries. I know. I'll hurry. At 6:15, Ethan knocked on Vivian's office door. She opened it herself, which surprised him. No assistant, no buffer, just her. Come in quickly. The office was darker than usual, the city lights outside providing most of the illumination. Vivian moved to her desk but didn't sit, her posture tense. They questioned you about the power failure. They questioned me about the emergency override. I didn't tell them anything. I know. Davidson called me after, furious that you wouldn't cooperate. I had to intervene. Vivian turned to face him. Ethan, you need to stop protecting me. If they think you're obstructing their investigation, then they think I'm obstructing. But I'm not going to throw you to the wolves just because they're frustrated. Ethan kept his voice calm. You asked me to report unusual things. Someone hacking the building management system to cause a targeted blackout seems pretty unusual. Did they tell you that conference room was specifically isolated? Vivian's expression confirmed she knew. They think someone wanted to trap me in there. Make me vulnerable again, like the first incident. Maybe take pictures this time, or worse. But they failed because I opened the door. Ethan felt the pieces clicking together. Whoever did this didn't account for someone actually helping you. They expected you to be alone and panicking until power was restored and they could execute whatever they had planned. Which means they know about my panic attacks. They know about my triggers. Vivian's voice was tight with anger and fear. The list of people with that knowledge is very, very short. Family, Ethan said quietly. Amanda mentioned your brother, said he resents you. James is ambitious and bitter, but I don't know if he's capable of this. He'd have to hire help, coordinate the technical aspects. And what would be the endgame? Embarrass me? Force me out? Vivian shook her head. It doesn't track. There's something else happening here, something I'm not seeing. Then we need to draw them out, make them make a mistake. Ethan surprised himself with the we, with the assumption that he had any right to be part of this strategy. But Vivian didn't correct him. I've been thinking the same thing, but it's risky. If we make the wrong move, if we tip them off that we know this is targeted, they'll either back off or escalate. And based on what I've seen, backing off doesn't seem like their style. Ethan glanced at his watch. 6:22, 8 minutes left. What if we make it look like you're vulnerable again? Create an opportunity that seems perfect, but is actually a trap? Using me as bait, Vivian's smile was grim. Elizabeth suggested the same thing. But the board would never approve it. Too risky, too much potential liability. Then don't tell them. Tell them you're implementing new security protocols or something. But set up a situation where whoever's doing this thinks they have another chance. This time, we'll be ready. Vivian studied him for a long moment. Why are you doing this? You could just do your job, collect your paycheck, Stay out of the corporate drama. Why put yourself in the middle of something that could destroy your career? Ethan thought of Sophie, of the way she'd looked when she asked if he was sad, of all the promises he'd made to protect her from a world that kept trying to prove promises were just words people said before they let you down. Because somebody has to. Because I saw what those panic attacks do to you, and nobody deserves to be hunted like that. And because, he paused, surprised by his own honesty. Because you gave me a second chance when you didn't have to. The least I can do is help you survive long enough to not regret it. Something shifted in Vivian's expression, a crack in the armor that she quickly sealed. Your daughter is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She's the only thing that makes sense most days. Ethan checked his watch, 6:27. I need to go, but think about what I said. If you want to set up a trap, I'll help however I can. Be careful, Ethan. Whoever's doing this has already proven they're willing to use you. They won't hesitate to hurt you if you get in their way. Let them try. I've been through worse than corporate politics. He left before she could argue, jogging to the elevator and willing it to move faster. He reached his car at 6:33, texted Mrs. Chen that he was on his way, and drove through evening traffic with the kind of controlled urgency that came from knowing someone was counting on him. Sophie was waiting at Mrs. Chen's window again, her face lighting up when she saw him. You're late. I know, baby. I'm sorry. Work emergency. He knelt down to her level. But I'm here now. Pizza night? Can we get the one with the stuffed crust? We can get whatever you want. They drove to the pizza place, and Ethan let Sophie chatter about her day while his mind churned through implications and strategies. Someone was hunting Vivian Hale with precision and patience. Someone who knew her weaknesses, her schedule, her secrets. Someone close enough to hurt her and distant enough to stay hidden. And somehow, Ethan Rowe, a maintenance worker with a 7-year-old daughter and a life built on staying invisible, had become the one person standing between Vivian and whatever darkness was closing in. He looked at Sophie across the booth, sauce on her chin, joy in her eyes, and made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, whatever trap they set or danger they faced, he would make sure he came home. Every single night, no exceptions. Because Sophie needed him. And increasingly, though he barely understood how it had happened, Vivian Hale needed him too. The storm was coming. Ethan could feel it building, could sense the tension stretching toward a breaking point, and when it finally broke, when whoever was behind this made their next move, he would be ready. He had to be. Too many people were counting on him to be anything less. The rain started again as they left the restaurant, soft at first, then building to the same relentless drumming that had accompanied every turning point in this strange new chapter of his life. Sophie held his hand as they ran to the car, laughing at the water, innocent and trusting. Ethan held on tight and hoped that trust wasn't something he'd end up breaking after all. The plan came together over 3 days of careful choreography, each piece positioned with the precision of chess players who knew one wrong move could end the game. Vivian announced a late-night strategy meeting in conference room 4525, the same room where she'd been trapped during the blackout. The announcement went out through official channels, visible to anyone with access to the executive calendar system, which meant visible to whoever was watching. Ethan spent those 3 days installing what looked like routine security upgrades but were actually surveillance equipment hidden in smoke detectors, air vents, and the decorative molding that cost more than most people's cars. Daniel Park, from cybersecurity, worked with him, their conversations clipped and professional. Two people who didn't particularly like each other but respected competence when they saw it. If this goes wrong, Park said, as he calibrated a camera lens no bigger than a shirt button, if whoever we're trying to catch gets spooked or worse, if Ms. Hale gets hurt, this falls on both of us. You understand that? I understand that someone's been hunting her for weeks, and we're the only ones trying to actually stop it instead of just writing reports. Ethan secured the panel and tested the feed. Clear image, no distortion. How's the audio? Park checked his tablet. Crystal, we'll hear a pin drop. He looked at Ethan with something that might have been grudging respect. You know, for a maintenance guy, you're not terrible at this spy stuff. I prefer to think I'm terrible at it, but too stubborn to quit. The night of the meeting, Ethan arrived at the executive floor at 9 p.m., well past his usual departure time. Mrs. Chen had Sophie for the night, which had required explanation and promises, and one very serious conversation with his daughter about how sometimes daddies had to work late even when they didn't want to. "You'll come home though, right?" Sophie had asked, her hand clutching her stuffed elephant, her eyes too old for 7 years. "I'll come home. I always come home." Ethan had knelt down and held her face gently. "And tomorrow we'll go to the park, just you and me. We'll feed the ducks and get ice cream even if it's cold outside. Deal?" "Deal. But Daddy, be careful at work. You look worried." He'd kissed her forehead and tried not to think about how perceptive children were, how they absorbed the anxieties their parents tried to hide. "I'm always careful, baby girl." Now, standing in the dimly lit corridor outside conference room 4525, Ethan felt anything but careful. He felt exposed, vulnerable, like he was standing in an open field waiting for lightning to strike. Chief Davidson was positioned in the security office with a full tactical team on standby. Park was monitoring all digital systems from a remote location. Elizabeth Hale, the company's general counsel, was in her office with lawyers and documentation ready for whatever legal fallout might come. And Vivian Hale was alone in conference room 4525, visible through the glass walls, reviewing documents that were actually blank pages printed to look important, bait in a trap they'd all helped set. Ethan's radio crackled softly. "All positions check in." One by one, the team confirmed readiness. Ethan pressed his button. "Maintenance position secure. All equipment operational." "Copy that." "Miss Hale, you're live in 5 minutes. Remember, at the first sign of actual danger, we abort. Pride isn't worth your life." Vivian's voice came through calm and steady. "Understood. Let's see who takes the bait." The minutes crawled past with excruciating slowness. Ethan stayed in his designated position, a maintenance closet with a clear view of the corridor and direct access to the conference room. His hand rested on the door handle, ready to move, his other hand gripping his radio. At 9:47 p.m., the building's environmental systems registered a temperature drop in the executive HVAC zone. Subtle, easily missed, but Park caught it immediately. "We've got anomalous activity in the climate control system. Someone's accessing it remotely." "Can you trace it?" Davidson's voice was tight. "Working on it. They're routing through multiple proxy servers. This is sophisticated." Ethan watched through the crack in his door as the lights in the corridor began to flicker. Not a full blackout like before, but a rhythmic dimming that created pools of shadow and uncertainty. He could see Vivian in the conference room, still seated, still apparently absorbed in her fake documents, but her posture had shifted slightly, coiled, ready. "Temperature in room 4525 dropping fast," Park reported. "Down to 62 degrees and falling. They're targeting her specifically." The tactical team leader's voice cut in. "Do we move?" "Not yet," Vivian said firmly. "Let them commit. We need to catch them in the act." Ethan's breath fogged in the suddenly cold air. The temperature was dropping everywhere now, not just in Vivian's room. Whoever was doing this had control of the entire floor's environmental systems. Through the crack in his door, he saw frost beginning to form on the windows. Then the elevator chimed. Everyone froze. That elevator required executive clearance after 9 p.m. Only a handful of people had the credentials to call it. The doors opened and James Hale stepped out. Ethan's stomach dropped. He'd suspected, they'd all suspected, but seeing it confirmed was different. James looked around the dimmed corridor like he owned it, which technically he partially did, and moved with the confidence of someone who believed they'd covered all their bases. "We've got visual on James Hale," Davidson said quietly. "Hold positions. Let's see what he does." James walked directly toward conference room 4525, and Ethan could see the moment Vivian noticed her brother through the glass. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened. James knocked on the glass, his smile visible even from Ethan's distant position. Vivian stood and opened the door. "James, what are you doing here this late?" "I could ask you the same thing, sister," James's voice carried in the quiet corridor. "Working on another brilliant strategy to save the company? Or just trying to prove you don't need sleep like us mere mortals? If you came here to criticize my work ethic, you've wasted a trip." "Actually, I came to talk. Without the board, without the lawyers, without all the people you surround yourself with, so you don't have to face family, honestly. James stepped into the conference room uninvited, and Ethan tensed. This wasn't part of the plan. They'd expected sabotage, evidence of remote manipulation, maybe catching someone accessing systems they shouldn't, not a direct confrontation. All teams stand by, Davidson ordered. Ms. Hale, say the word and we extract you. But Vivian's voice when she responded to her brother was ice. If you have something to say, James, say it. Fine, I'll be direct. You need to step down as CEO. The words hung in the frigid air like a physical presence. Vivian's expression didn't flicker. On what grounds? On the grounds that you're mentally unstable. On the grounds that you have panic attacks that compromise your ability to lead. On the grounds that you're paranoid and isolated and driving this company into the ground with your control issues. James pulled out his phone and held it up. I have documentation, witness statements, medical evaluations from doctors who've treated you for anxiety disorders. You've been building a case against me. Vivian's voice was dangerously quiet. For how long? Does it matter? The point is, I have enough to take to the board. Enough to force a competency hearing. You'll be removed, and someone who actually understands how to run a company without alienating everyone around them will take over. Someone like you. Someone like me, James agreed. I'm not the villain here, Vivian. I'm trying to save the family legacy before you destroy it. Dad built this company for both of us, not just his favorite daughter. Ethan saw Vivian's hands clench at her sides, saw the effort it took for her to stay calm. And the incidents? The maintenance worker you set up? The blackout that trapped me? All of it was to prove I'm unstable? James's smile widened. I don't know what you're talking about, though I did hear about some unfortunate security breaches. Must be stressful dealing with that on top of everything else. Anyone would crack under that kind of pressure. He's admitting it, Park said through the radio. Not directly, but close enough. We've got everything on audio and video. Not yet, Davidson said. We need explicit confirmation. Ms. Hale, can you push him? Vivian took a step toward her brother, and Ethan saw something in her posture that made him move closer to his door, ready to intervene. You hired someone to hack our systems. You manipulated an innocent man's credentials to make it look like he violated my privacy. You trapped me in a room during a blackout, knowing exactly what that would do to me. And you did all of it to gather evidence that I'm unfit to lead. Is that about right? You're paranoid, Vivian. You're seeing conspiracies where there are none. That's exactly what I'm talking about. This kind of delusional thinking, it's dangerous for someone in your position. James moved closer to her, his voice taking on a false note of concern. I'm worried about you. We all are. The board, the executive team, even your own security chief. Everyone can see you're struggling. Everyone? Or just the people you've been manipulating? Vivian's voice rose slightly. How much did it cost to buy their loyalty, James? Or did you just promise them better positions once I was gone? I didn't have to promise anyone anything. They came to me because they're concerned, because they see what I see. A CEO who's becoming increasingly erratic, who trusts no one, who's more interested in control than actual leadership. James pulled out his phone again and started recording. In fact, let's document this moment. Here you are, after hours, in an empty building, confronting me with wild accusations. This is exactly the kind of behavior that proves my point. That's when Ethan saw it. The window behind them, where frost had been forming in decorative patterns, cracked. Not shattered, just a single fracture spreading across the glass like a spider web. The temperature had dropped so low that thermal stress was compromising the structural integrity. All teams, we have a safety issue, Ethan said into his radio. The window integrity is compromised. We need to evacuate that room now. But before anyone could respond, James made his mistake. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, holding it up with a triumphant expression. You want to know how I did it? This little piece of technology gives me complete access to the building's environmental and security systems. Cost me 6 figures and 6 months of planning, but it was worth it. Every temperature drop, every blackout, every convenient malfunction, all controlled from right here. James, Vivian said slowly, put that away. This has gone far enough. Has it? I don't think so. I think we're just getting started. You see, I'm going to walk out of here, and tomorrow I'm going to that board meeting with everything I have. And when they ask me if I think you're fit to lead, I'm going to tell them the truth, that you're a liability, that you're unstable, and that for the good of the company our father built, you need to step down. James's finger moved over the device. And just to make sure you understand how serious I am, he pressed something on the screen. The remaining lights went out completely. The emergency lighting didn't activate, and through the darkness, Ethan heard the sound of locks engaging throughout the floor, the magnetic seals that were supposed to keep areas secure in case of emergency now trapping everyone in their current positions. "That's it," Davidson barked. "All teams move now. We're extracting Ms. Hale." But Ethan was already moving, shouldering through his door and sprinting down the corridor. He could hear James laughing in the darkness, hear Vivian's sharp intake of breath. The window behind them gave another ominous crack. "James, unlock the doors right now," Vivian demanded, her voice tight with the edge of panic creeping in. "People are trapped up here." "They'll be fine. Emergency services will get them out eventually, but you and we're going to stay right here and finish this conversation. Because I want you to really understand what it feels like to be powerless, sister. I want you to know that everything you've built, everything you've controlled so carefully, can be taken away in an instant." Ethan reached the conference room and threw himself against the door. Locked, the electronic system engaged by whatever James had triggered. Through the glass, he could see both Hales turning toward the sound, could see Vivian's face in the dim light from the city outside, could see the fear starting to override everything else. "Ms. Hale!" Ethan shouted. "Step away from the window!" James turned toward the voice, his expression shifting from triumph to confusion. "Who the hell are you?" "Maintenance, and I'm about to break your very expensive door." "The hell you are!" James moved toward the door, but Vivian grabbed his arm. "Let him in, James. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. End this now." "I'm not ending anything until you agree to step down, until you admit that you're not capable of leading this company." James shook her off, his voice rising. "I'm tired of living in your shadow, tired of watching you get all the credit while I do all the actual work. Dad might have loved you more, but that doesn't mean you're better than me." The window gave one more crack, a sound like a gunshot in the quiet, and Ethan made his decision. He stepped back, raised his leg, and kicked the door as hard as he could. The glass was reinforced, designed to withstand impacts, but it wasn't designed to withstand a desperate man with everything to lose. The glass spiderwebbed but held. Ethan kicked again, feeling something in his ankle protest. Again. The third impact sent cracks radiating from the lock mechanism. "Stop!" James was at the door now, his face pressed against the glass. "You're destroying company property. I'll have you arrested." "Get in line!" Ethan growled and kicked one more time. The lock mechanism gave way with a screech of tortured metal. The door swung open, and Ethan stumbled through just as the window behind James and Vivian finally gave up its fight against physics. The glass didn't explode inward, but it bowed dangerously, the crack widening into a gap that let in freezing November wind and the sound of the city below. "Everyone out, now!" Ethan grabbed Vivian's arm and pulled her toward the door. She came willingly, but her eyes were on her brother, who stood frozen, staring at the failing window behind him. "James, move!" Vivian shouted, but James was looking at his device, pressing buttons frantically. "It's not responding. The system's locked me out. I can't." "Forget the device and get out of there." Ethan moved back toward him, but the tactical team was pouring into the corridor now, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Two of them grabbed Vivian, pulling her to safety despite her protests. Two more went for James, who finally seemed to understand the danger he was in. They got him out seconds before the window gave way entirely, not shattering but separating from its frame in one piece, sliding down the exterior of the building with a sound like the world tearing open. Cold wind roared into the conference room, scattering papers, overturning chairs, a reminder of how high 45 stories really was. Ethan stood in the corridor, breathing hard, his ankles screaming, watching as security zip-tied James Hale's hands behind his back, while he sputtered protests about rights and lawyers and misunderstandings. Vivian stood against the opposite wall, wrapped in someone's jacket, her face pale but composed, watching her brother with an expression that held equal parts sorrow and steel. "The device he had," Park was saying to Davidson. It's a custom-built system override controller. Whoever made this for him knew our systems inside and out. This is corporate espionage at minimum, possibly conspiracy to commit assault given the safety violations. James Hale, you're under arrest for corporate sabotage, criminal trespass, and reckless endangerment, Davidson said formally. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane, James struggled against the security officers holding him. I'm a VP of this company. You can't arrest me for trying to protect it from an unstable CEO. Actually, we can arrest you for hacking building systems and creating life-threatening situations, Davidson said coldly. The unstable CEO allegations? That's for the board to decide. The criminal charges? Those are going to a prosecutor. They led James away, still protesting, still trying to justify actions that had crossed so many lines there was no path back. The corridor slowly returned to normal as emergency services arrived, as building engineers assessed the damage, as lawyers descended like birds of prey on fresh roadkill. Through it all, Vivian stood silent, her arms wrapped around herself, watching the space where her brother had been. Ethan approached carefully, giving her room to refuse his presence. Ms. Hale, are you okay? She turned to look at him, and he saw tears she wouldn't let fall. My brother just tried to destroy me, used my own trauma against me, manipulated our company's systems, put innocent people at risk, all because he couldn't stand being second. So no, Ethan, I'm not okay. But I'm still standing, which is more than he expected. You're more than still standing. You caught him. You got evidence. Whatever he was planning, it's over now. Is it? Vivian's laugh was bitter. His accusations weren't entirely wrong. I do have panic attacks. I do have control issues. I did isolate myself because trusting people seemed more dangerous than being alone. She looked directly at Ethan. Maybe he should have won. Maybe someone without all my issues would be better for this company. Maybe someone without your issues would have crumbled the first time he attacked, Ethan said firmly. Maybe someone without your strength wouldn't have had the courage to set this trap in the first place. You're not perfect, Ms. Hale. Welcome to being human. But you're also not weak, and you're definitely not the villain in this story. Vivian studied him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. You keep saving me. First the panic attack, then tonight. Why? Because someone needed to. And because Ethan paused, searching for words that felt true without being presumptuous. Because I know what it's like to feel like you're fighting alone. After my wife left, after Sophie was diagnosed with anxiety disorder, I felt like I was drowning and nobody noticed. Mrs. Chen noticed. She showed up with food and babysitting and didn't ask for anything in return except that I keep trying. Sometimes people need someone to show up, so I'm showing up. Mrs. Chen sounds like a good person. She's the best. You'd like her. She's bossy and honest and doesn't care about anyone's title. That got a small, genuine smile from Vivian. I think I would like her. The smile faded. What happens now? Elizabeth Hale appeared before Ethan could answer, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes sharp. What happens now is you go home, get some sleep, and tomorrow we deal with the fallout. The board will want answers, the media will want statements, and we need to decide how to handle James's arrest without creating a public relations nightmare. Handle it transparently, Vivian said tiredly. No cover-ups, no spinning the story. He committed crimes, he endangered people, and he's facing consequences. If the board has a problem with that, they can join him in explaining themselves to authorities. That's a bold strategy. I'm tired of not being bold. I'm tired of hiding and controlling and trying to manage every perception. Vivian straightened, and Ethan saw the CEO emerging from the exhausted woman. James was right about one thing. I have isolated myself. But that changes now. No more operating from fear. If people want to judge me for having anxiety, let them. At least they'll be judging the truth instead of whatever fiction he was selling. Elizabeth nodded slowly. I'll draft a statement for tomorrow. But Vivian? That speech about transparency and truth? Save it. The board isn't ready for radical honesty. They're ready for damage control and careful messaging. You can be brave, but be strategic too. After Elizabeth left to coordinate with the various authorities and departments, Vivian turned back to Ethan. You should go home. Your daughter is probably worried. Mrs. Chen knows I'm working late, but you're right. I should check in. Ethan pulled out his phone and sent a quick text, receiving an immediate response with a photo of Sophie asleep, clutching her elephant. The tightness in his chest eased slightly. "She's beautiful," Vivian said, glancing at the photo over his shoulder. "She looks peaceful." "She is when she's asleep. Awake, she's a tornado of questions and energy and worry." Ethan smiled. "Best thing that ever happened to me, even on the hard days." "You're a good father. She's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have her. She's the reason I get up every morning, the reason I keep trying when everything else feels impossible." Ethan pocketed his phone and met Vivian's eyes. "What about you? Do you have anyone checking in on you tonight, making sure you're really okay after all this?" Vivian's expression shuddered slightly. "I have security, I have lawyers, I have more people than I can count making sure I'm physically safe and legally protected." "That's not what I asked." She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "No, I don't have anyone checking in to make sure I'm okay. That's what happens when you build walls high enough. Eventually, nobody bothers trying to climb them anymore." Ethan made a decision that was probably foolish, almost certainly overstepped professional boundaries, but felt right anyway. "I'm checking in. And not as an employee or as part of some security protocol. As someone who knows what it's like to go through hell and pretend everything's fine." "Are you okay, Vivian?" The use of her first name, the directness of the question, seemed to crack something open in her. "No, I'm angry and hurt and relieved and exhausted all at once. My brother hated me enough to try to destroy me. My own family couldn't stand my success enough to let me have it without sabotage. And the worst part is, I keep wondering if he was right. If I am too broken to lead, too damaged to be trusted with responsibility." "He was wrong," Ethan said with absolute certainty. "Being wounded doesn't make you broken. Having anxiety doesn't make you unfit. Needing help doesn't make you weak. You know what makes someone unfit to lead? Being willing to hurt people to get what you want, which is exactly what James did, and exactly what you refused to do." Vivian's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You barely know me. How can you be so sure?" "Because I've seen you at your worst and your best. I've seen you panicking in a locked room, and I've seen you walk into a trap to protect your company. I've seen you treat a maintenance worker with more respect than most people show their equals. Maybe I don't know your favorite color or how you take your coffee, but I know the things that matter. And what I know says you're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're meant to do." A single tear escaped down Vivian's cheek before she brushed it away impatiently. "Thank you. For tonight, for all of it. I know I keep saying that, but I don't know how else to express what you've done." "You don't have to express anything. Just don't let James's poison convince you to be less than you are. The world needs people who lead with strength and compassion. Don't let him take that from you." Vivian nodded, composing herself. "Go home to your daughter, Ethan, and tomorrow, take the day off. You've earned it, and Sophie deserves time with her father after he spent the night playing hero." "I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who kicks in doors when necessary." "Then I'm glad you're the door-kicking type." Vivian extended her hand formally, and Ethan shook it, feeling the tremor in her grip that she was trying to hide. "Good night, Ethan, and thank you. Again." He left her there, surrounded by the organized chaos of an incident being processed and documented, and made his way to the elevator. His ankle throbbed, his body ached from adrenaline crash, and his mind kept replaying the moment when that window finally gave way, the sound of it sliding down the building like the end of something. But they'd survived. Vivian had survived. James was in custody, the threat was neutralized, and tomorrow the real work of healing and rebuilding would begin. Ethan drove home through streets that were finally quiet, the rain having moved on to terrorize some other city. He picked up Sophie from Mrs. Chen's apartment, carrying his sleeping daughter to their own place, tucking her into bed with her elephant and a kiss on her forehead. "Love you, baby girl," he whispered. "Tomorrow we feed the ducks." "I promise." In her sleep, Sophie smiled, secure in the knowledge that Daddy always kept his promises, that the world was safe because he made it so, that tomorrow would come and he would be there to share it with her. And in a tower across the city, in an office with one wall open to the November night, Vivian Hale stood alone and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The betrayal, the relief, the exhaustion, The strange warmth of knowing that someone had shown up when it mattered, not because they had to, but because they chose to. She pulled out her phone and composed a text to Elizabeth. Tomorrow's board meeting. I want Ethan Rowe given a commendation for his actions tonight. Full recognition, official record. He deserves credit for what he did. Elizabeth's response came quickly. Already drafting it. Also, the board wants to discuss your mental fitness for leadership. We need to prepare a response. Vivian typed back. Let them discuss it. I'm done hiding. If they want transparency, they'll get it. Schedule a full disclosure meeting. Medical records, therapy history, everything. Let them see exactly who they're judging. There was a long pause before Elizabeth responded. Are you sure? That's a risk. I'm sure. No more secrets, no more shame. James wanted to use my anxiety against me. Instead, I'm going to use it as proof that strength comes in many forms, including the strength to admit you need help and get it. Vivian sent the text and set down her phone, looking out at the city that never really slept, just pretended to rest while the real work happened in darkness. Tomorrow would bring challenges, questions, judgments. But tonight, she'd survived. And survival, she was learning, was sometimes the bravest thing you could do. Morning came too quickly, breaking through Ethan's curtains with the kind of insistent light that refused to acknowledge how little sleep he'd gotten. His ankle had swollen during the night, purple and tender, a physical reminder that kicking through reinforced glass doors had consequences beyond the immediate heroics. He limped to the kitchen and started coffee, wincing with each step, when Sophie appeared in her pajamas, hair sticking up in every direction. Daddy, you're walking funny. Just twisted my ankle at work last night. Nothing serious. He poured her juice and started on pancakes, their Thursday morning ritual. Remember what I promised? Park today, ducks, and ice cream. Sophie climbed into her chair, studying him with that too perceptive gaze children developed when they'd learned early to watch for signs that adults were leaving. You look tired, like when Mommy used to be tired all the time before she left. The comparison hit harder than it should have. I'm not going anywhere, baby. Just had a long night at work. But I took today off, which means I'm all yours. What do you want to do first? Feed the ducks, then swings, then ice cream. Then, can we go to the library? I finished all my books. We can do all of that. Ethan flipped the pancakes, grateful for the normalcy of this routine, for Sophie's trust that today would unfold exactly as promised. Go get dressed. Something warm. It's going to be cold by the water. While Sophie got ready, Ethan checked his phone. 17 messages, most from work. He scrolled through them, piecing together the aftermath of last night. James Hale had been formally charged with multiple felonies. The board was meeting this afternoon. Media outlets were requesting comments about the incident at Hale Industries headquarters. And buried in the work messages was one personal text from an unknown number. This is Vivian. Elizabeth gave me your number. I wanted to check if you're okay. Your ankle looked bad when you left. Please take care of yourself. And thank you again for everything. Ethan stared at the message, unsure how to respond. The distance between their worlds felt simultaneously vast and irrelevant after last night. Finally, he typed back, "Ankle's sore, but I'll live. More importantly, how are you doing? Last night was a lot." The response came quickly. Preparing for the board meeting, Elizabeth thinks they'll try to use James's accusations to force my resignation. I'm planning to give them more honesty than they bargained for. Wish me luck. You don't need luck. You need to remember that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth convincing. There was a long pause before she replied, Ethan Rowe, maintenance technician and surprisingly good therapist. Thank you. That helps more than you know. Sophie reappeared, wearing her purple jacket and rain boots despite the clear sky. I'm ready. Can we go now? Ethan pocketed his phone and focused on what mattered most. Let's go feed some ducks. The park was quiet on a Thursday morning, mostly occupied by retirees and parents with toddlers. Ethan and Sophie walked slowly to accommodate his ankle, stopping at the small store to buy duck food despite Sophie's argument that bread would work fine. At the pond, they scattered pellets while ducks paddled over with enthusiastic quacking, and Sophie laughed with pure joy at their aggressive politeness. That one's named Henry, she decided, pointing at a particularly bold mallard. And that one's George, and that one's... Let me guess. Princess? No, Daddy. That's obviously Gerald. Sophie rolled her eyes with 7-year-old exasperation. Princess would be a silly name for a duck. Ethan smiled, watching her feed Gerald and his companions, and felt the tension from last night finally start to ease. This was real. His daughter's laughter, the cold air, the simple pleasure of throwing food to waterfowl. Corporate conspiracies and billionaire CEOs and broken windows felt like something from a different life entirely. They spent an hour at the park, then got ice cream at Sophie's favorite shop where the owner knew her order by heart. Chocolate chip cookie dough, always, with rainbow sprinkles that she'd carefully count to make sure there were enough colors. At the library, Sophie disappeared into the children's section while Ethan sat in one of the comfortable chairs and tried not to think about what was happening at Hale Tower. He failed. His mind kept drifting back to Vivian's text, to the board meeting happening right now, to the question of whether courage was enough when facing people determined to find weakness. He pulled out his phone and almost texted her, then stopped. She didn't need distraction right now. She needed to fight her own battle, and he needed to trust that she was strong enough to win it. Sophie emerged with 6 books, all about animals or adventure, and they checked them out before heading home. It was 3 p.m. when they walked through their apartment door, and Ethan's phone immediately buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Hello? Mr. Rowe, this is Amanda Pierce from Hale Industries. Ms. Hale asked me to call you. She wanted you to know the board meeting concluded an hour ago. She's still CEO, and there were no motions to remove her. In fact, several board members formally apologized for not taking the threats against her seriously. She asked me to tell you that your advice about honesty was exactly right. Relief washed through Ethan so powerfully he had to sit down. That's great news. Thank you for calling. There's more. The board voted to create a new position, Director of Facilities and Safety Integration. It's a management role overseeing all building operations, security coordination, and safety protocols. Ms. Hale specifically requested that you be offered the position. The salary is substantially higher than your current rate, and it comes with full benefits, education assistance for dependents, and flexible scheduling to accommodate family needs. Ethan's mind reeled. Director. Management. Education assistance for Sophie. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. Ms. Hale is hosting a small dinner tomorrow evening at 6:30, just a few people who helped with the situation. She'd like you to attend if you're available, and she'd like to discuss the position then. Can I tell her you'll be there? I'll need to arrange childcare. Bring your daughter. Ms. Hale was very clear that Sophie is welcome. She said something about it being time the tower felt more human, and children remind adults what actually matters. After Amanda hung up, Ethan sat in his living room trying to process the conversation. A director position. Management. The kind of job that could change everything for him and Sophie. Better apartment, savings, security. But it also meant more responsibility, more visibility, more entanglement with a world he'd spent 3 years staying invisible in. Daddy? Sophie climbed onto the couch next to him. Is something wrong? No, baby. Something's very right. My boss wants to give me a promotion. A big one. Does that mean we can get a puppy? Ethan laughed, pulling her close. Let's start with getting through tomorrow's dinner first. How do you feel about meeting my boss? She's very important and a little scary, but I think you'd like her. Is she nice? She's been through a lot, but yes, I think she's nice. She's also very smart and very strong. Sophie considered this seriously. Okay, but I'm wearing my princess dress. If she's important, I should look fancy too. The next day passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. Ethan cleaned their apartment even though they weren't hosting anything, pressed his only good shirt, and watched Sophie try on every possible combination of dress and accessories before settling on purple with sparkly shoes. At 6 p.m., they drove to the address Amanda had provided. Not Hale Tower, but a restaurant in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place that didn't advertise because the people who needed to know about it already did. A valet took Ethan's aging Honda without judgment, and a hostess led them through an elegant dining room to a private area and back. The space was small and warmly lit, intimate in a way that felt intentional. Vivian stood near the window talking with Elizabeth Hale, but she turned when they entered, and her face lit up with a genuine smile. Ethan, I'm so glad you came. She approached, then crouched down to Sophie's level with natural grace. "And you must be Sophie. Your father has told me wonderful things about you. I love your dress." Sophie, rarely shy, studied Vivian with open curiosity. "Are you Daddy's boss?" "I am. Is he a good worker?" "He works too much sometimes, but he always keeps his promises." "That's very important, keeping promises." Vivian glanced up at Ethan. "He kept several promises to me recently, and I'm very grateful." Also present were Chief Davidson, looking uncomfortable in civilian clothes, Daniel Park, who nodded at Ethan with genuine respect, and Amanda Pierce, who helped Sophie find the perfect seat and immediately engaged her in conversation about favorite books. It was a small group, deliberately so, and Ethan realized this wasn't a corporate celebration. This was Vivian's way of thanking the people who'd stood with her when it mattered. Dinner was served family style, encouraging conversation that flowed naturally between lighthearted topics and occasional references to what they'd been through. Sophie charmed everyone with her observations about duck naming conventions, and her very strong opinions about whether pizza or tacos were the superior food. Watching his daughter interact with these people, watching Vivian laugh at Sophie's jokes and Elizabeth discuss library book recommendations, Ethan felt something shift in his understanding of what was possible. These weren't just powerful people in an untouchable world. They were humans who appreciated a child's honesty, who valued courage over credentials, who understood that strength came in many forms. After dinner, while Sophie was distracted by Amanda showing her photos of her own nieces, Vivian gestured for Ethan to join her by the window. The city spread out below them, lights beginning to twinkle as evening settled in. "Amanda told you about the position?" Vivian said without preamble. "She did. It's incredibly generous, but I'm not sure I'm qualified. I'm a maintenance technician, not a director." "You coordinated with security, implemented surveillance systems, analyzed building vulnerabilities, and maintained operational composure during a crisis situation. That sounds like director-level competency to me." Vivian turned to face him fully. "But more than that, you saw past the corporate hierarchy to what actually mattered: people's safety, truth over politics, courage over convenience. Those are the qualities I need in someone overseeing critical operations." "What about the board? They might not appreciate promoting the maintenance guy who got caught up in their CEO's family drama." "The board voted unanimously to create this position and approved you specifically for it. After I explained what really happened, after they saw the evidence of James's sabotage and your role in resolving it, they understood that titles matter less than character." Vivian's expression softened. "And honestly, after I spent 2 hours being completely transparent about my anxiety, my therapy, my triggers, and my commitment to leading this company anyway, they were in no position to question unconventional choices." "You really told them everything?" "Everything. Elizabeth nearly had a heart attack, but I meant what I said about no more hiding. If I'm going to lead authentically, that means acknowledging my struggles alongside my strengths. Several board members actually thanked me afterward for being honest. Apparently 2 of them have family members with anxiety disorders, and my willingness to discuss it openly meant something to them." Ethan shook his head in admiration. "That took incredible courage." "I learned from someone who kicked down a door to help a near stranger during a panic attack. If that's not courage, I don't know what is." Vivian paused, choosing her next words carefully. "I want you to take this position, Ethan. Not because I owe you, but because you'll be genuinely good at it. But I also understand if you prefer to stay where you are. Visibility has costs, and you've worked hard to build a stable life for Sophie. I won't pressure you." Ethan looked across the room at his daughter, who was showing Amanda her sparkly shoes with infectious enthusiasm. He thought about all the years of staying invisible, of keeping his head down, of building walls around their small life to keep it safe. Those walls had protected them, but they'd also limited what was possible. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said. "When you decided to be transparent with the board, were you scared?" "Terrified. I was convinced they'd use my honesty against me, that vulnerability would be seen as weakness." "But you did it anyway." "I did it anyway, because living behind walls was killing me slowly, and I decided that if I was going to fall, I'd rather fall while being authentic than succeed while being false." Vivian met his eyes. "Why do you ask?" "Because I've been doing the same thing, building walls, staying small, convincing myself that safe was the same as good. But watching Sophie tonight, seeing her interact with all of you without fear, I realized I'm teaching her to be brave by showing her I'm willing to try new things, even when they're scary. Ethan took a breath. I'll take the position, and I'll do everything I can to deserve the trust you're placing in me. Vivian's smile was radiant. You already deserve it. Welcome to the leadership team, Director Rowe. They shook hands formally, then Vivian laughed and pulled him into a brief hug that surprised them both. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. For seeing past the CEO to the person. For helping when you didn't have to. For reminding me that asking for help isn't weakness. Thank you for taking a chance on the maintenance guy who accidentally walked into your life at the worst possible moment. I'm starting to think it was the best possible moment, just terrible timing. Vivian released him and stepped back. Now go be with your daughter. She keeps looking over here to make sure you're okay. She loves you very much. She's my whole world. I can tell. And Ethan, the education assistance in your benefits package? That includes private school tuition if you want it. Sophie mentioned she's interested in science. I know several excellent schools with strong STEM programs. Just something to consider. Ethan's throat tightened with emotion he couldn't quite name. Gratitude, certainly, but also something deeper. The feeling of being seen, of being valued, not despite his circumstances, but including them. I'll definitely consider it. Thank you. The dinner wound down with promises to coordinate start dates and training schedules. Sophie fell asleep on the drive home, clutching a small toy elephant that Vivian had quietly given her, saying it reminded her of courage and memory. Ethan carried his daughter upstairs, tucked her into bed with both her stuffed elephant and the new one, and sat in the dark living room thinking about how dramatically life could change in just a few weeks. He'd started this month as an invisible maintenance worker, content with his small life and modest ambitions. He was ending it as a director with opportunities he'd never imagined, not because he'd sought them, but because he'd chosen to show up when someone needed help. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. Heard from Amanda about your promotion. So proud of you. Sophie will be thrilled. You deserve good things, Ethan. Finally, you're getting some. He responded with gratitude, then saw another message, this one from Vivian. Thank you again for coming tonight. Sophie is delightful, and watching you with her reminded me what good parenting looks like. You're raising a remarkable human. Also, I meant what I said about the schools. No pressure, but I can make introductions if you'd like. Sleep well, Director Rowe. Ethan smiled and typed back, Sophie loved meeting you. She asked on the drive home if you were a princess because you seemed important and kind. I told her you were something better, someone who worked hard and stayed brave even when things were difficult. She said that sounded better than being a princess anyway. See you Monday, Ms. Hale. Her response was immediate. At some point, you're going to have to start calling me Vivian, but we'll work up to that. Good night, Ethan. The following Monday, Ethan arrived at Hale Tower in a suit that still felt foreign, but was necessary for his new role. His office was on the 44th floor, smaller than the executive suites, but with a window and actual furniture that hadn't been salvaged from other departments. Amanda had already stocked his desk with the supplies he'd need, and a schedule of meetings was waiting on his computer. The transition wasn't seamless. Some of the maintenance crew resented his promotion, muttering about favoritism and luck. Some of the executive staff treated him with barely concealed skepticism, clearly doubting a former technician's ability to manage complex operations. But Chief Davidson became an unexpected ally, and Daniel Park proved surprisingly supportive. And gradually, Ethan found his footing. He implemented new safety protocols based on what they'd learned from James's sabotage. He created communication channels between maintenance and security that hadn't existed before. He hired 2 new technicians and made sure they understood their value to the organization. And slowly, the skeptics became believers as operations ran smoother, response times improved, and the building felt more secure. Vivian maintained professional distance in public, but in private moments, passing in corridors, brief conversations in elevators, there was warmth and mutual respect. She'd started therapy more seriously, she mentioned once, processing the trauma from her childhood that James had weaponized. She seemed lighter somehow, less burdened by the need to appear invincible. 6 weeks after that dinner, on a gray December afternoon, Ethan was reviewing maintenance schedules when his office phone rang. Vivian's extension. Director Rowe's office. Ethan, it's Vivian. Do you have a few minutes? Something non-urgent, but important. He found her in her office, standing by the window that had been repaired after that night. The view was the same, but something about her posture was different, more relaxed, less defensive. Everything okay? He asked. More than okay. I wanted to tell you before it becomes public. James accepted a plea deal. Guilty to all charges in exchange for reduced sentencing. No trial, no prolonged media circus, just accountability and consequences. Vivian turned from the window. It's over, Ethan. Really over. How do you feel about that? Relieved, sad, angry that it came to this, but grateful it didn't get worse. She paused. Mostly, I feel free. Like I can finally stop looking over my shoulder, stop waiting for the next attack. He can't hurt me anymore. That's good. That's really good. Ethan moved closer. And how are you doing otherwise? With everything? Therapy is hard but helpful. I'm learning that control is sometimes just fear wearing a power suit. I'm trying to let go of the things I can't control and focus on what I can. Being a good leader, treating people well, building something sustainable rather than just successful. Vivian smiled. I'm also learning to ask for help, which apparently is a revolutionary concept for someone who spent 20 years proving she didn't need anyone. Asking for help is brave. I'm glad you're learning that. I had a good teacher. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit. I have something to discuss with you. Ethan sat, noting the hint of mischief in her expression. Should I be worried? The opposite. I'm creating a new advisory board. Not the corporate board, but a small group of people whose judgment I trust to give me honest feedback on major decisions. People who see past the CEO to the person and will tell me when I'm wrong. I'd like you to be part of it. Me? Vivian. I've been a director for 6 weeks. I barely know what I'm doing half the time. Which makes you perfect. You ask questions others assume they know the answers to. You see patterns from a perspective no one else has, and you're not afraid to challenge assumptions, which is exactly what I need. She leaned forward. I'm not asking you to have all the answers. I'm asking you to bring your perspective, your honesty, and your willingness to speak up when something doesn't make sense. Will you do it? Ethan thought about the maintenance worker who'd stumbled into a CEO's private suite and accidentally changed both their lives. He thought about Sophie, who'd taught him that bravery was trying new things, even when they scared you. He thought about the promise he'd made to himself to stop hiding behind walls. I'll do it. But I'm going to ask really inconvenient questions sometimes. I'm counting on it. Vivian extended her hand, and they shook on it, sealing another agreement that felt significant beyond its immediate terms. As Ethan stood to leave, Vivian called after him. Ethan, thank you for everything you've done, everything you continue to do. This company is better because you're here. I'm better because you're here. The feeling is mutual. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Walking back to his office, Ethan pulled out his phone and texted Sophie's school to let them know he'd be there for pickup today. Then he texted Mrs. Chen to see if she wanted to join them for dinner, his treat, because he'd just gotten another raise, and because some people deserved to be celebrated for showing up when it mattered. That evening, Sophie, Mrs. Chen, and Ethan sat in their favorite pizza place, the one with the arcade games and the cheerful chaos of families sharing meals. Sophie was explaining her science project with enthusiasm, gesturing wildly enough that Ethan had to rescue her water glass twice. And then the volcano erupted, and it was so cool. Miss Peterson said mine was the best in the class. Sophie paused in her story. Daddy, are you happy? The question caught him off guard. Of course I'm happy, baby. Why do you ask? Because you smile more now, like real smiles. Not the ones you do when you're trying to make me feel better, but you're actually worried. Sophie tilted her head, studying him with that too-old wisdom. You used to be worried all the time, but now you're different, lighter. Mrs. Chen reached over and squeezed Ethan's hand. She's right. You've been carrying the world on your shoulders for so long, it's good to see you learning to share the weight. Ethan looked at his daughter, at this wise, perceptive child who saw more than he gave her credit for, and felt his throat tighten with emotion. You know what? I am happy, really happy. Things are good,
and they're going to keep getting better. Is it because of your new job? Partly, but mostly it's because I remembered that being scared is okay, as long as you don't let it stop you from trying. And because I have you, which means I have everything that matters. Sophie considered this seriously, then nodded. Can we still get a puppy, though? Let's start with moving to a bigger apartment first, then we'll talk about puppies. But Daddy, you said... I said we'd talk about it, and we will. I promise. Ethan ruffled her hair, laughing at her exaggerated pout. When have I ever broken a promise to you? Never, Sophie admitted. You always keep your promises. That's why you're the best daddy ever. Later that night, after Sophie was asleep and Mrs. Chen had gone home with another care package of leftovers, Ethan stood at his apartment window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Vivian Hale was probably still working, probably still fighting battles he couldn't see. But she was fighting them with more support now, with people who cared about the person behind the title. His phone buzzed with a text from her. Sophie was right at dinner. You should definitely get a puppy. I have it on good authority that children who grow up with pets develop excellent empathy and responsibility. Also, puppies make everything better. Sleep well, friend. Ethan smiled at the word friend, at the way it felt both inadequate and exactly right for what they'd become to each other. Not boss and employee, not CEO and director, but two people who'd stumbled into each other's lives at exactly the right moment and chosen to keep showing up for each other afterward. He typed back, already researching shelters, Sophie wants to name it Gerald, after the duck. Fair warning, you'll be expected to meet said puppy once we get one. Apparently anyone Daddy talks about is automatically Sophie's friend too, and friends need to meet important family members. Her response made him laugh. I'm honored to be included. Haven't been anyone's friend in a long time. I'll bring appropriate puppy meeting gifts. Good night, Ethan. Thank you for being exactly who you are. Good night, Vivian. Thank you for seeing who that was. Ethan set down his phone and walked through his small apartment, already mentally measuring spaces in the larger place they'd move to soon. He checked on Sophie one more time, watching her sleep with both elephants clutched close, and felt a contentment he hadn't known was possible. Life had thrown him into chaos, had challenged everything he thought he knew about his place in the world. It had been terrifying and difficult and completely unexpected, but it had also been the best thing that could have happened because it had forced him out of hiding and into living. He'd learned that walls built for protection could also become prisons. That vulnerability was strength in disguise, that showing up for someone, even when it was inconvenient or scary, could change everything. The titles mattered less than character, and power meant nothing without compassion. Most importantly, he'd learned that second chances were real, that healing was possible, and that sometimes the person you saved ended up saving you right back. The rain started again, gentle this time, a soft percussion against the windows that sounded like possibility rather than warning. Ethan listened to it, smiled, and went to bed with the certainty that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities to choose courage over comfort, connection over isolation, truth over convenience. And when morning came, when Sophie woke him with demands for pancakes and questions about when they could visit the shelter, Ethan would be ready. Ready to keep building the life they deserved, ready to keep showing up for the people who mattered, ready to keep proving that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they chose to try. The maintenance worker and the billionaire CEO. The single father and the wounded leader. Two people from completely different worlds who'd found common ground in courage, compassion, and the radical choice to see each other as fully human. It wasn't the ending Ethan had expected when he'd walked through that door weeks ago. It was infinitely better. And as he drifted toward sleep, listening to the rain and the quiet sounds of his daughter breathing in the next room, Ethan Rowe felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope for a future that was bright and wide and full of possibilities he was finally brave enough to reach for. The tower still stood across the city, lights burning in windows where people worked and worried and dreamed. But it felt different now, less intimidating, more human. A place where second chances were possible, where mistakes could be forgiven, where showing up with kindness could change everything. Tomorrow, Ethan would return to that tower, not as someone trying to stay invisible, but as someone who'd earned his place through courage and character. He'd lead meetings, make decisions, continue building something meaningful. And at 6 p.m.,
He'd leave to pick up Sophie, because some promises were sacred and some priorities never changed. But tonight, in this quiet moment before tomorrow began, Ethan simply existed in the peace of knowing he'd done the right thing, the hard thing, the brave thing. He'd shown up when someone needed him. He'd chosen connection over safety. He'd proved that walls could come down without everything falling apart. And in her own tower across the city, Vivian Hale sat in her office and felt the same peace, the same gratitude for an accidental collision that had become an intentional friendship. She'd learned to ask for help. She'd learned that strength included vulnerability. She'd learned that the people worth keeping close were the ones who saw your worst moments and chose to stay anyway. 2 lives, changed forever by a moment of mistaken entry and genuine compassion. 2 people learning that healing was a journey taken together, that trust was built through consistent showing up, that the best relationships began with honesty and grew through mutual respect. The rain continued its gentle song, washing the city clean, and somewhere between those 2 towers, one where Ethan slept beside his dreaming daughter, one where Vivian finally allowed herself to rest, the distance didn't matter anymore. They'd found what everyone searches for, connection that transcended circumstance, understanding that didn't require explanation, friendship that asked nothing but offered everything, and that in the end was worth more than any title, any salary, any success that came without soul. It was worth everything.